Good evening, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Pixels to Politics with your host, Dougie. Tonight, we are joined by our guest, Bray, for a deep dive into global affairs. From drone warfare to missile defense systems in the Israel Iran conflict, we'll explore the complex dynamics shaping our world. Join us as we discuss international support for Israel, Russia's role in the Middle East, and the impact of social media in conflict. Stay tuned for an insightful conversation on modern warfare, Israel's response to threats, and the growing trend of isolationism. Plus, we'll touch on the culture war, oil prices, cyber warfare, and let's jump in. So, I think
Sounds good.
very easy to start with the attack over the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty rough, I think, for Israel. I know Israel came out with a statement and said that they managed to negate 99% of the missiles that were directed towards them. But I was looking at videos earlier and yesterday, and it did seem like some had hit an airport and a couple other locations. So I think the reason why Israel is probably lying about the effectiveness of the Iron Dome is because they don't want to open themselves up to more attacks potentially from other Middle Eastern countries that would want to capitalize on a weakness in their defense. So I think Israel is actually lying about the state of affairs that's been going on between them and Iran.
It definitely wouldn't be surprising. But even if the Iron Dome system, which for those who don't know is a missile defense system, um, surface to air, it's it
Yeah,
still is a remarkable piece of technology that has protected them pretty much since its inception. Um, Even if it blocked 90%, I would say that's still pretty successful. But it also wouldn't surprise me if they were lying about how much had gotten through.
yeah. I think the number is probably more around 70%.
Mm,
I wouldn't say 99%. I would say it
wow.
negated about 70, but I'd say that 30% of missiles hit targets that were outside of its effective range for the most part. And they just don't want to. They don't want to give up any information that says this is the effective range of the Iron Dome. They just want to keep it as sort of like a glass house. Like this is the entire thing. It covers the whole span, and it can affect any wall that it hits for the most part, anyway. But I don't think that Iran is going to do another attack anytime soon because they did just use up a lot of resources. I think they're going to wait. They did just make a threat to the United States that if they provide any support, that they will be targeting U.S. embassies as well and other U.S. Foreign agencies.
The embassy part is pretty interesting because it's kind of uh, there was there was some fake news here, but basically what caused the attack was Israel's bombing of an Iranian consulate annex,
Correct.
which is it's a separate building from the actual consulate. I keep hearing people say, "Oh, they bombed the embassy." The bomb. Not technically, it still isn't okay, obviously, but um, these details are important. They had bombed an annex building on consulate ground, which is still considered an attack on basically home soil, and they had killed
Yeah.
what the West has declared as terrorists. So I just wanted to clarify that because I keep seeing so much disinformation around it, and people are
Yeah.
losing their minds. And so this was Iran's response. I think there's a lot of I don't know. There's a lot of chaos around.
I yeah.
There's a lot of chaos around it because one of the things you bring up, it's good. It's like, what is the real percentage? I mean, we don't really know, but that's not the only thing we don't know. We don't know shit. we don't,
Yeah.
the civilians, we have no idea. We can only take these wild guesses, and we just get caught by surprise as to what happens. Um, but what we're told is that 300 drones and missiles were shot. I think from
Around that. Yeah.
Iranian soil. Yeah, they traveled quite a good amount of distance, and then they were not only intercepted, as many as were intercepted by the Iron Dome system, but also by fighter jets from the U.S., the U.K., France, and a couple other countries. which
Yeah.
I just think is so cool. uh,
Yeah.
um, pretty neat that we can do that.
Yeah. I think it is pretty interesting. But I do think that there is a lot of mistakes being made here. America is trying to demonstrate itself as kind of like a neutral entity and just keep extending the issues that have been going on between different countries. Right now, the cosmos are kind of aligning, which is why people are afraid of a world war.
Hmm.
Because every country that's in the Eastern Hemisphere has something that they want. Like Russia wants Ukraine, China wants Taiwan, North Korea wants South Korea, the Middle East wants Israel back as its holy land.
Hmm.
So each of these four giant powers wants something. And so you have four giant powers that are all located nearby that all want something, and the only countries that are really getting in the way of it are NATO and the United States
It,
for the
it,
most part.
it's just the let's just be honest. It's only the United States. I mean, the other
Yeah,
countries are playing a role, and that's great. But
yeah. For
the
the most
amount
part, it is the United States. Yeah,
the gap between how much of a role the U.S. is playing versus all the other countries. I mean, it's so insane. I was reading an article earlier that was saying how the U.S. literally just proved that it is the only superpower. And
yep,
I kind of agree. I'm not gonna lie, I do kind of agree. The fact that we can play such a large, quick role. I mean, that response. There's some rumor that Iran had told the U.S. I just was watching a press conference and they were, debunking it, saying it doesn't make any sense. Which, again, who the hell knows? We can't possibly know. But the response was pretty quick. Like they
yeah,
clearly U.S. intelligence knew that something was happening. They saw the movement of ammunition,
yep,
and the drones and missiles getting ready to be launched, and they immediately moved a carrier much closer, launched the planes from the carrier and from surrounding bases, and were able to participate. I think it was they said that over 100 drones um, were shot down by
yeah,
U.S. forces alone, which is crazy. I mean, that's a 1/3 of a foreign attack
yeah,
taking place. That's wild. That is so crazy, and I'm sure more could have been done, if needed. Um,
yeah. Absolutely.
yeah,
I think that
yeah. Go ahead.
I think things are going to be changing here pretty soon. I feel like NATO is going to have to adjust their policies as to how to deal with Ukraine. I think that China is eventually going to launch an attack on Taiwan, which is
Sure.
going to spark a skirmish between United States and China. And then North Korea is still trying to get its missiles up and running for South Korea. But I don't know if they have the technology or the resources to really fund that kind of thing anyway. So I wouldn't really be too concerned about North Korea. Most of their missiles have been flops. I think the only concern right now is mainly China. I feel like Russia's, for the most part, isn't going to be worried too much about Ukraine. At this point, it's just going to be a matter of dealing with rebuilding Ukraine and whether or not they're going to be well integrated into NATO at all, or how that's going to work with their borders. The Middle East is always going to, like, as long as the Middle East exists, as long as it's still a prevalent force, they're always going to go after Israel because Israel is living on quote unquote their land,
Hmm.
which Israel did acquire that land by effectively booting out um, Muslims from Israel's land, from Jerusalem. That's how they acquired it. That was back in the 1950s with the aid of the United States.
And the
That's how they
UK.
acquired it to begin with. Yep. And so it's this thing where the Middle East is just not going to give up until they have their land back. That's just how it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of ideological differences. Um, Sometimes you hear that it's not territorial or religious or uh, a culture war, but it is literally all of those things. It is
Yeah,
literally all of those things. It's about territory. It's about religion. It's about culture. They just clash. I mean, it's probably the biggest contention point between East and West ideology, and it's just that's the volcano hotspot right there. It's
absolutely.
always waiting to blow, always waiting to blow. It's the biggest clash, and I mean, oh, us as Americans, I think we don't know how the 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 cultural thinking is, but there are people
No.
there that literally believe that if they go and they die in this holy war, that they go to heaven instantly. That's
Yeah,
what they believe in their brains, man. Like that's what they think. That's what they wake up and that's what they think. And that's how
exactly.
intense the differences are between, the two people. So Israel's unfortunately just smack dead in the middle of these, two very different cultures. Um and
And the
yeah,
reality, yeah, yeah, the reality of it is they're not going to be able to hold out forever. The Middle East is only getting bigger. Their people are only getting more advanced as time goes on, whether people want to believe it or not. And the reality of it is that Israel, the Iron Dome, is not going to last forever. Israel's support that they receive from America is not always going to be enough. Eventually, they're going to get through. That's just what's going to happen. Because when you look at, especially breeding rates, if you want to look at a longer time frame, Muslims outbreed most other people, excluding, I think, Africa. It
yeah,
outbreeds
Africa has got the
most,
highest fertility rate right now.
yeah, highest fertility rate. And so they have families, they have literal families where men have up to like 5 wives, and they just have a bunch of kids, and they teach those kids what they believe, which is that Israel is their land, and those kids grow up believing that Israel belongs to them, and they go to war to fight and return Israel to their cause, and that's just how it is, and that's how it's always going to be until it's back in their hands and back as their property. And so ultimately, it's either going to end up being a war, or it's going to be they have to be appeased, and Israel has to be returned to um, the Middle East. That's just the future. It is what it is type of deal.
Yeah, I don't really see a third option. I think a lot of what has been going on in international affairs in these specific hot zones has kind of just been it's about stalling as much as possible and as long as possible. A lot of people are two-state solution and like ceasefire, and it's just like, I mean, yeah, that's great. Like in a perfect world where two people don't want the same resource, but it's just not a reality. And
No.
unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, we've had a ceasefire. We've had very thin peace for, 60, 70 years. And unfortunately, this type of action is inevitable.
Yeah.
You're Russia, they're Russia, China, and Iran. This, unfortunately, they feel like they're backed into a corner, and kind of rightfully so. That being said,
Yeah.
it's hard to align with them, at least in my opinion, when you learn about some of the awful things that takes place. And yeah, they feel like they're backed into a corner. They really do. The
Yeah.
U.S. has backed them into a corner. Our allies have backed them into a corner, and this is them saying, "Okay, we're done. We're done with like the economic fight that you guys keep putting against us. You're winning that. We're done fighting, within the diplomatic measures that the UN allows for. You guys are winning that. Like the only way that they think they can move forward is through combat. They're
Exactly.
yeah. So and that's where we are. And over the weekend, we got to see kind of our first look at what a modern attack will look like. You know,
Yeah.
we've kind of seen
And
pieces of
yeah.
it in Europe, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're gonna like people in general in that area are gonna see a lot more missile strikes. They're gonna see a lot more explosives being used because ultimately explosives are what deals the damage. That's what makes the difference. Because they don't mind destroying the buildings. They don't mind destroying the infrastructure or the territory or the landscape at all. They can rebuild all that. All they need is the border lines. That's what they need. They just need what's within the border lines. And so for them, using as many explosives as possible, it doesn't matter to them. Now,
So
Israel is having to, yeah, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think there's also a deep hatred for
Yeah,
the other side, and so it
absolutely.
a lot of people talk about the gloves having not come off yet, which I think is fair. I think no country has just been like, okay, we're going full blast. We're gonna unleash
Yeah,
everything we have. But there is a growing emotional hatred that's these leaders on both sides and people. It's building up, and at some point, a world leader is just gonna snap and say, okay, like this is it, go time.
yeah, exactly. I think what will probably end up happening is China will end up making a deal with the Middle East, and the deal will be something along the lines of, you help us deal with Taiwan and help us scout for U.S. forces along the western side of India, and we will assist you in dealing with the Iron Dome in Israel.
Mm.
Because the only way that I think the Middle East is starting to understand it at this point, the only way the Middle East can get through Israel is if they ally with someone nearby that has adequate enough forces, which is more likely going to be China. Russia may cut in on a piece of the action of that ally um, with Ukraine. They may be like, hey, China, since you're making this deal with the Middle East, why don't you help us deal with Ukraine, and we'll send some of our forces your way for Taiwan, dealing with that. And that'll probably be what happens. And I'm sure at some point North Korea will kind of just be like the little kid that like wanders into the room and is like, "Can I play too?" And everyone's like, "Sure, North Korea. Let me guess, you want South Korea?" I'll be like, "Yeah, I got some missiles. Like, we know you have some missiles. They haven't really worked, but we'll help you out if you send whatever it is that you have to Taiwan." And North Korea will probably be like, "Sure, awesome, yippee," and everyone will clap like the little Wii characters. Yeah, that'll be probably how it plays out more than likely.
Yeah, they're publicly and obviously behind the scenes, they've uh their alliances have grown by quite a bit, and I think this situation will only push them closer together, because there's
Yeah,
no way that, like, you don't look at this attack from their side and go, ooh, that was rough, that was an L,
yeah,
assuming that the defenses worked as well as they say they did, or that they don't
yeah,
know how bad, that they did it in reality. Um,
yeah,
so I mean, you put together this much of your weaponry, you send it forward, and reportedly only like one or two pieces lands, and only one person gets hurt, and that person is a little girl. It's not a good look,
yeah,
that's for sure. So um, either way, it's the alignment politically, or which side these countries are choosing, is becoming very obvious. And
yeah,
unfortunately, even when uh, they're on the offensive, they're still losing. So
yeah.
it's only going to make them angrier and
One,
more
yeah.
ambitious. Yeah, um, which makes
The
them.
only This is like a Jenga tower. The only way to stop the game of Jenga from continuing to be played is if the tower comes crashing down. And the only way for the tower to come crashing down is for one of those three countries that want something, Russia, China, and the Middle East, is for one of them to get what they want. So, for example, if Taiwan surrenders itself over to China right now,
Which it won't.
they have no more reason. They don't have a reason to ally. And so
Oh,
Russia
sure.
and the Middle East realize they won't be able to win against the United States, and they will effectively either continue to attack and or just back off and wait until like maybe decades from now when they have a better opportunity. And same thing with the Middle East. If Israel surrenders to the Middle East, they won't have any reason to help China out with Taiwan. They'll have what they want. And so China's going to realize they're not going to have the surveillance and the authority that they're going to need in order to capture Taiwan for themselves, and they're going to back off. So once one of them gets what they want, then the rest will back off. But now, if all of them ally together to get what they want at the same time, that's where a war starts. And the only way a war can continue is if the United States is complicit in continuing that war. So I think what the United States needs to actually do is to just say, we don't need allies. We're backing off.
Oh,
That's what
okay.
they need to do.
So you are more isolation, more into the
Absolutely.
isolation. Okay, it
We
is a
have given
growing.
so much, yeah,
It,
we've given so much time, so many resources to these countries that have done nothing for us but cause problems. We have sent so many forces, so many men over there to help them with their issues, and we haven't even had our toes scratched, let alone our backs. We need to stay away from this conflict. We need to simply let them have what they want, which is their land back, because to them, that's their stolen land. They want the land back. Let them have it. As long as it's not interfering with NATO lines, and as long as we're not trying to make other countries a part of NATO in the process of all of this, I say we should just be backing off and protecting our country and just focusing on building up our military. We don't need to fight anyone. We need to remain the pacifists in this situation. If we continue to be the aggressor, then a war will definitely break out, and no one needs innocent deaths on their hand more so than that there already have been. That is my opinion.
It's a growing opinion. I hear this one a lot. My
Yeah,
I'm in the opposite boat. I think I, I think we either go full force or back off. To be honest with you, and I think we should have done it already. I'm
yeah,
very much like, if we're gonna support them, then fucking support them, man. Don't like do this half in half out bullshit. Um, that
yeah. It's like a welfare approach. We're not really helping them. We're just funding them.
Well, I mean, you can only speculate, but I think one of the things going on is it's very similar. A lot of what's happening right now is so similar to the start of World War II, or like what happened just before World War II, where a dictator steps in, they invade another country, and the West is like, that's not good, and they do this kind of slow roll activity where they offer support while they actually build up their militaries, which is what's going on. I mean, it's all
Yeah,
very public. NATO's been pretty open about, like, we're going to support Ukraine, and the individual countries are kind of on and off board. But a lot of what NATO's doing currently is building up their militaries. A lot of countries, all of a sudden, their budget for the military jumped past 2%. Now,
yeah,
it was very quick. Dude, the U.S. has made so much money selling military equipment in the past like 5 years because of the invasion. It's so crazy,
it
how much
is.
money we've made. And I
Uh,
think a lot of what's going on is just buying time for us to get ready. I don't really see us ever living in a world where a dictator like Putin or Xi, like, they get Ukraine or they get Taiwan, they're just like, we'll just fucking stop. Like, that's never happened in the history of the world. Nobody just takes land and then it's just like, you know what, hey man, good job, we call it a day, and then leave. Like, there there's just never happens. It's always like, oh shit, we can take land and resources. Let's do that again, and then they just keep going and going and going. And both of them have already kind of made it clear that they want more. Both of them have made it clear they want more. China has this 10 dash line thing where pretty much they think it's no longer called the China Sea internationally, it's called something else because of
yeah,
China's openness about taking all of that area. Um, but like they've made their ambition really clear, and it's the same with Russia. They've also, I mean, they haven't made theirs as clear, but they keep fucking up and exposing themselves, and it's kind of funny. Um, but both of them have just they it's very obvious they want more than just Taiwan or Ukraine. They're just gonna keep going, and I think what we're seeing right now from the West is very similar to what we did just before World War II and during World War
I
II,
agree.
where so personally, you look at history, isolationism never works out. It didn't work for Japan. It didn't work for the U.S. before World War II. Uh, it didn't really work for France and the UK. Like it very rarely actually works because unfortunately, they're greedy. They just want more. Want more land, want more power, want more money, and they'll just keep going and going. It's kind of in the dictator's playbook to keep these things going on because it keeps it keeps the forces of your country outward, and you can't get toppled if all the strong fighting men are not in range. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um. So yeah, I
I
think.
think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
I ranted for
I
a bit.
think. Yeah, no, I think Japan has actually done a really good job with isolationism. I think their country has actually been in a much better position than others, ignoring their GDP. Their GDP has been on a decline. It's been on like a kind of like a roller coaster type of graph, but I think they've done a good job of isolationism for the most part. I can't guarantee though that China would not invade Japan, considering their long rivalry that they have between each other. Um, I do think that if North Korea does manage to take over South Korea, though, Japan will probably be next on the list. Um, I do think that in terms of what America should do, I don't necessarily think letting them have this stuff is good, but I do think the alternative is more lives get lost in the process. Um, whether it, more than likely it will be innocent lives, and those are the most important ones, in my opinion. I think that Taiwan is one of the, well, I know it is. It's one of the greatest exports of micro technology, stuff like processors, graphics cards, and all everything like that. So in terms of forwarding AI, if they get taken over, that'll be a huge advantage for China, which America would probably not want to begin with. So America may actually end up sacrificing Israel if need be, just in order to keep China from having Taiwan if our forces get spread too thin. I believe Russia will eventually get Ukraine at some point. Not anytime within this decade, but within the next few decades or so, I'd say. If we were to go all out as the United States against three different superpowers, we would need to enlist. We would definitely need assistance from neighboring countries. NATO is already one that would be on our side because we pretty much are the only reason that they still exist. And then you kind of just have Africa, which is just there. Like I don't like I'm not sure what our intel operations are like in Africa. I don't know if we have any agents in Africa that would provide any value for any skirmishes in the future. I do know that it exists. I know it's there. I don't think it'd be of any assistance really. And then you have
Well,
India. Yeah, good.
I was just gonna say, well, there's ECOWAS, which is Western Africa. They played a pretty large role during World War II, and they some of those countries really love the U.S. because we've um, kind of promoted democracy and we've helped them get on their feet. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of coups in it's called the Sahel region,
Yeah,
and that it kind of went under the radar, but a lot of those countries have been waiting for something to happen so that they can
yeah,
make their move. Um, I don't. It's hard to say because they're smaller countries, not necessarily in population, but in terms of might and power. But they are there. They also played a role in World War II. One of the reasons they love us is because during World War II we freed them from dictators and um, Germany and Italy when we
yeah,
used Africa to get up into the European continent. So
yeah. Yeah, I mean that was definitely useful back then. I'm just not sure how it would translate nowadays. I'm not sure what we would do with Africa, or I know the Chinese influence in Africa has increased as well, which is kind of why I'm on the fence about it, because I don't know how many of the African countries there are really going to assist with whatever it is that we may need in a time of war.
not many. It wouldn't be a significant. I mean,
Yeah,
who knows? Maybe they would, but
and then South America is just kind of there, aren't they?
oh god, South
Like
America's
what are they doing? Like they're literally right next to us, and they don't like. Do they have an opinion? I don't even think they have an opinion. I think
well,
they're just there.
there's Venezuela who is very much aligned with Russia and China, and they've made some threats about invading. I think it's Guyana. I might be wrong, but um, yeah, I don't know. They're just doing their thing.
They're just kind of there. Like isolationism is just working out for them.
Yeah,
It's
well,
like
I think the U.S. kind of plays a bit of a role in that too, in keeping. I mean, I think we've done a poor job at it, but keeping outside influences from creating too much chaos down there. Um,
yeah, I mean it's like I don't even know how we would go about dealing with a South American invasion. Like I mean I guess we just kind of just bulldoze them. But I mean if it was during a time where like we already have most of our forces spread somewhere else, I think it would cause problems potentially. I don't know, like what would South America do? That's the only thing I'm asking myself. Like what would they do? Like a war breaks out, what are they doing? They're doing
there,
nothing. They're just chilling, right?
a lot of what happens during. So I mean, like every country has ambition, and
Yeah, yeah,
unfortunately, a lot of their ambition is like, oh, this is our land from 80 years ago. We want it back, which is
yeah,
Venezuela and Guyana. There's a piece of land used to
yeah.
be Venezuela's. They haven't been able to figure out whose it is. I mean, technically they had it's Guyana's, and They
Yeah.
just don't agree. They're just like, yeah, no, we don't agree with that. It's gone to the UN. It's passed like 3 or 4 times. They just don't care. So a lot of what's going on right now is a lot of countries are kind of waiting for somebody to do something else. And one of the things we saw after Israel attacked the consulate annex, Iran's
Yeah.
consulate annex was, I think it was Ecuador raided a Mexican embassy, and they were looking for somebody, and they got him. And Mexico was like, I think it was Mexico, I'm pretty sure. They were
Yeah.
like, that's very legal. You cannot do that in the eyes of the international court. You cannot do that. Attacking, going into an embassy, a foreign embassy, that's crazy. It's pretty much seen as an invasion of homeland, which is why Iran was so pissed about the Israel attack. However, the fact that we see these activities happening so close together is not a coincidence. The second somebody does something like that, a country, other people see that, and when there's no repercussions, or at least no repercussions that matter, they go, oh, we can do that too. And as far as attacking an embassy, that's a really big deal. That matters a lot. Again, that's seen as a foreign attack on your soil. Um, so
Honestly,
we'll,
I don't even. Why would you even want to invade the Mexican embassy? That's my thought process there. Like,
there
why
was
would you even want?
there
Like,
was a
what was the game plan?
there was a corrupt politician. I think. Let me look it up real quick. Uh, Here it is. They wanted to arrest former Ecuadorian Vice President George Glass, who has been taking refuge in the embassy since last December. I don't know what he did. I think it's corruption, but Ecuador invaded the embassy and took the guy into custody. So it's a really big deal. It seems like it's not, but it's a huge deal. That's like insanely illegal. You cannot do that. That again, it's seen as a foreign attack. Um,
It-
and
Okay, so
this
they, yeah.
this happened literally 4 days after Israel bombed uh, the consulate. Literally 4 days.
Yeah. So they just use the chaos as like a method for it.
Well, I mean, it's just that a lot of these countries, they have ambition, they have things that they want to do, and they can't because they see the UN as an obstacle. They're a little scared, and so what happens is a lot of people kind of wait for somebody else to do it first. So Israel did it.
Yeah.
Ecuador probably saw that and was like, "Oh, this is on the table now," and then they initiate the raid, and it happens really quickly. Like, it happens very fast. It's not a coincidence that we saw Russia's first invasion in 2014
No,
of
no.
of Crimea, and then we see and they get away with it, right? There's no punishment, and then they line
Yep.
up their forces, and then they invade Ukraine proper. This is not like a coincidence. It's just they do it. They see that they can get away with it. And they're like, oh, let's keep going. And this is a
Yep.
common common talk in debates around the world. It's like, hey, that's why a lot of people get on Joe Biden in the administration about not doing enough, and they
I
expect.
mean,
Go ahead.
what's he gonna do? I mean,
They want him to go
he's
1v1.
they wanted to, yeah, 1v1. Yeah, they wanted to 1v1. Yeah, like Joe Biden 1v1 versus,
Joe, get in there.
leader of Iran. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not Joe would forget when the fight was. Yeah, that would not be viable at all. And he
Well,
would lose too.
well, a lot of countries have seen the U.S. as a policing force,
Yeah.
and normally the U.S. does kind of press very quickly on the throats of these countries who take actions like this, like the raid on the embassy. Of like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if something like that had happened, well, when it wouldn't have happened because they would be scared of the response. But if it had happened, the U.S. would have stomped all over Ecuador's throat. There'd be sanctions, there'd be international outrage. It'd be crazy. There would be
Yeah.
a policing. So a lot of people see a lot of countries see the U.S. as like the world police, and unfortunately, I think policing at this point without using military force is kind of very difficult. And the U.S. is getting
Yeah.
into this spot of, do we fucking throttle you or do we do nothing? And unfortunately, it will just end in the U.S. throttling, I think, some of these countries because they're just going to keep escalating, right? Like they get away with these
Yeah.
small things, they escalate, they do it again, they escalate, and then the U.S. will have no choice but to fucking destroy some of these people or countries. And I don't know, I just don't really like the direction we're headed in. I think it's a very
I don't. I
spooky
don't
time.
either. I think once again we are giving too much funding to different countries. We need to be preserving our economy. We need to be preserving our country. And if we are going to help out these countries, then they don't need funding. They need us to come in there and provide some sense of authority. And if that's, I think that's fine. I think that creates incentive for people to get a job in the military or for people to work in the military. It creates opportunities for people, but I don't think we should be giving them money. Money is not going to fix the situation. Israel already has an Iron Dome, and yet we're talking about funding them, even giving them even more money. They already have something that literally destroys the majority of missiles that come within their vicinity. Like, why are we giving them more money?
It's because
And
the
yeah,
interceptors that the Iron Dome uses is made in the U.S. I think it's Lockheed. Um, so like
yeah,
the
it's for
money
sure
when they
Lockheed.
say sometimes, not all the time, but when we say giving them money, we actually say we're giving the money to Lockheed, and then they'll replenish. That's kind of what's going
Yeah,
on. Same with Ukraine, where when they say, oh, we're 40 million aid package. Not all the money is like going into Zelensky's hands. A lot of it is just kind of flowing back into the U.S. Now that still kind of can increase inflation and have its own problems, and it's
yeah.
just a part of the military industrial complex that we hear so much about.
If it were me, I would literally be like, okay, Israel, what do you do for me? And then they would be like, well, they'd stumble on their words and they'd be like, oh well, we do a lot for you guys. I'm like, name one thing, and they'd be like, and I'd be like, you're not getting my assistance anymore. You are a parasite. And then I would
Okay.
literally pull out forces.
Will they act as a foothold one for us in the Middle East? That's kind of their role, but also their main purpose um is more or less they're for the they were the reason behind the creation of the UN. So after World War II, Jews were displaced and massacred, and the UK and kind of the West in general in the US, they got together and were like, well, these poor people are scattered across the globe. We need to give them their home back because they were chased out by uh, the Romans and Arab communities in general. So they whatever. There's the fucking splitting of the land. There was a massive land grab. And then, but besides all that drama, the UN's foundation was created on the premise of two things. One, sovereignty, meaning you cannot invade or attack someone else's land, and then two, the only time you can do those things is when there's a genocide. Um, so you know the Jews, their persecution in Israel were they stood as like the first country, the first state um, that we were supposed to protect. I guess it's just like they're the cornerstone. They're the reason the UN exists. So if they were to fail, then for us it looks like shit. It doesn't look good. It's like okay, this is
Well,
the purpose of the UN. If it fails, wah wah, not a good look.
it seems to me like a lot of these policies mainly just benefit Israel. They don't really benefit any of the other countries involved. It sounds, and like what you just said about genocide, how is anyone going to be convinced that it's going to turn into, or that it's not going to be turn into, a rules for thee but not for me, where any attack done to Israel is seen as an anti-Israel genocide, but any attack done to the Middle East is not seen as an anti-Muslim attack. You see what I'm getting at?
I
So
I,
it's
I
like,
understand, and that's like a
yeah,
common. It's a common talking point, right? There's
yeah,
that is something that's passed around a lot, and the U.S. itself is very choosy. Most countries are very choosy with what is considered genocide and which countries we should protect and which ones we shouldn't. Um, there's been plenty
exactly.
of genocides in Africa. There's like fucking three in Ethiopia. Um, in like the span of like 2 or 3 to 5 years or some shit, and like that's not something anyone talked about at all. But it's not even the only country. Syria's fucking massive war zone also was kind of caused by genocide, and then all these countries like we should intervene, and it has been a shit show after.
Yeah,
So, unfortunately, I think a lot of the lines are being blurred now, where everyone's a Nazi, everyone's committing genocide. It's just getting very chaotic. There's a complete breakdown in language. which is never good. It's not a good thing at all. Um,
No.
I will say that one of the surprising factors we saw over the weekend was some of the Middle Eastern countries. Again, this is like coming back to the choosing sides thing, where quite a few of the Middle Eastern countries actually helped defend Israel, which is like unheard of. I mean, the attack itself from Iran was kind of crazy, but like even the defense from Saudi Arabia, that's a huge one. Even Saudi Arabia helped shoot down some of these drones and missiles. That's crazy because typically, um, a lot of the Arab nations try and stay out of this conflict, but
Well, I think about it from their perspective, especially if you're closer to Israel than Iran is. Think about it like this: you're closer to Israel, and you have a country that's right next to you that's trying to start a fight with Israel, aka, United States, and they're sending a bunch of missiles over there. And you don't want to be the guy that's caught in the middle of it as the first territory that gets taken over by the US in the times of war. So I think Saudi Arabia agrees with what Iran was trying to do, but I think they were like, hold on, let's not do anything just yet. This attack isn't going to be effective enough to deal anything. You're just going to piss them off. So we're going to shoot down some of your missiles to make us seem like the good guys so they don't try and mess with us as quickly as we wouldn't want them to. You see what I mean?
it's fair. You're not wrong. I do think a lot of what happens, including kind of the U.S. perspective, is like if we just play this defensive role, we just shoot down the attack, then we can delay, an actual war for who the
Yeah.
fuck knows. I don't think it'll be much longer, but that I do. You're right. The logic
Yeah.
behind that, I think, was if we stop these missiles from landing, then we can prevent a war for a little longer, and that's totally fair. Uh,
Yeah.
However, it's not a good, if you're Iran or some of the other uh, states that want to stop Israel, you see that happening. Just not a good look. Iran, Saudi Arabia is pretty much scared of Iran. It's one of the reasons they keep the U.S. close, is a defense against Iran. Um,
Yep.
so I do think it's at least kind of uh, a little bit of an indicator on which side these countries would choose in terms of conflict. I mean, that's what they're basically doing. That's what we're seeing. It's like countries kind of, okay, well, we're choosing this side, and a lot of countries I think are flocking to the West.
Yeah, I think it's best to imagine these situations as like groups of people. Like it's best to imagine Israel as like a group of Jewish people, and then the Middle East as like a group of Muslims. So you have a few Muslims that are in the group of Muslims that are yelling at the Jewish people and saying, "You stole our land, we want it back," and they throw rocks at them. Now the Jewish people have a bunch of big buff American dudes right next to them. And the big buff American dudes start walking up after they start throwing rocks. And Saudi Arabia is essentially just like getting them to put down the rocks. Like, dude, not right now. This is not a good time to be throwing rocks at the Jewish people. That's literally what's happening. And you'll see similar situations with like China and Taiwan as well. You have these small group of Taiwanese people and a large group of Chinese people, and they want to take Taiwan, but then they see this big buff group of American dudes, and they're like, we'll be patient, we'll wait, and that's kind of just what's happening right now for the most part.
Yeah, for sure.
That's yeah,
It does go back to a lot of people are just trying to see who's going to make the first move, and
yeah,
that'll be the reaction. We'll probably see more action from here on out. Maybe not. Maybe they saw the attack and they were like, "Oh God, dude, we're so outmatched. Israel and the West, they fucking shot down everything. We can't beat them." I doubt it. I don't think that'll be the response. I think it'll be more
yeah,
like, "Oh, it's on. Iran is doing their thing. It's time for us to do our thing." Um,
yeah, exactly.
what do you
I
think?
think let's go ahead.
What do you think about Benjamin's? What do you think Israel's response is going to be? I think that's kind of what everyone's waiting on right now. And it'll probably determine what happens next.
I don't think Israel's going to have a response other than that they say they're invulnerable. That's just they're going to be their only response. Israel right now is. they're aside from the Iron Dome, they are defenseless. Like they have a lot of armed forces in the streets. I've watched a lot of live streams of just like daily interactions in the streets of Israel, Tel Aviv, etc.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of armed forces that are patrolling the streets. And the reason for that is because the state is in like a very distressful situation right now. There has been several shootings, several. One of them occurred on a live stream that I was watching, where someone in like two people in the restaurant just got shot
Oh shit.
by by Muslim advocate. They didn't really state whether or not he was from the Middle East or not, but it just said simply that they were an advocate. And it's like they're not going to say anything other than we are strong, you can't hurt us, so please stop trying, because they know that if there's enough attacks against them, they will eventually break through that barrier. So they just want to dissuade them as much as possible from attacking. They want to keep peace talks on the rise, and they want to make it seem like they're not a threat to them and that they're not going to send anything at them at all. They just want to seem like the peaceful child in the room in order to be protected by the surrounding countries.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were surprised by how much support they had gotten during the attack. And I
Yeah,
think going back to, everyone just trying to keep things from getting out of control, but a lot of there was definitely some disbelief that the Western nations and even some of the Middle Eastern nations had jumped to Israel's defense, considering, you know, politically where they stood before the attack and how much there was a lot of discourse diplomatically, because
yeah,
of the Palestine stuff going on, Gaza and stuff.
yeah,
So um, I don't know if other countries were, outside the coalition. I don't know if they were surprised. Like, I don't know if they genuinely thought that the U.S. and others wouldn't have jumped to their defense. But that's probably untrue, just on the basis that Iran clearly said, "Oh, if you help out here, we'll consider you a threat too." They probably kind of understood that, even though they mince words and say, "Oh, you shouldn't do that," the U.S. clearly supports
yeah,
Israel, like
yeah.
very, very clearly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say the Israel has a pretty tight grip. I'd say that Israel is like the angry wife of America. It's kind of like if you don't do what she says, you're not gonna get to sleep with her tonight. You're sleeping on the couch. That's kind of how it's like,
I
and I
always,
don't know why it is that way.
well, I think, I mean, this is lost on a lot of people where they don't understand what Israel's importance is to the U.S. But for me, I compare it to being our baby. They're like our baby in the Middle East.
Yeah,
There are only 100% ally that we can pretty much always count on. There was like some indifference when it came to Russia, because Russia and Israel had some mutual agreements when it came to activity in Syria, I believe. So they
yeah,
they weren't really trying to cross those lines. But
yeah,
in general, Israel is like our child, and it became that way, I believe, after the Suez Canal crisis,
yeah,
where Britain and Israel like teamed up and they took the canal, and then the U.S. stepped in and was like, "What the fuck are you guys doing?" That's
yeah,
a no-no. And that was pretty much a turning point in terms of who Israel answered to,
yeah,
um, and also the UK. The UK at that point forward was like, "Okay, Daddy U.S. says
yeah.
we
Pretty
gotta
much. Yep.
we
Daddy
gotta
U.S.
we gotta do what they want." Um,
Yeah.
I think that was a pretty big turning point, and since then, the U.S. has played a very large role diplomatically with both of those countries, and it's
I
only
think, yeah,
sure.
I think that in order for these countries to receive our assistance, because we're giving a lot of this time and assistance and manpower to countries like Israel, I think that in order for them to receive these benefits, they have to agree to be adopted as under our constitution and under our rules and under our laws, and they have to become part of our states if they want to receive our assistance, and they have to lose their sovereignty and become a part of the American coalition.
Yeah. I think we'll see more of that as I think they'll whether it's by force or they just feel like they should. I think we'll see a lot of countries move closer and closer to the U.S. as
Yeah,
tensions keep rising for sure.
because the decision's going to have to be made. We can't keep having these, relationships with other countries where it's a give and we can't take anything. We can only give. We're only allowed to give. We can't take. And to that's just a one-sided relationship, and it's not going to work out in the long run. It's only going to hurt us. So there has to be a take, and that take has to be, hey, we get to have a say in what goes on in your country if you want our assistance. If you want to remain your your current country, if you want to have your current culture, you want to be able to keep all that intact, you're going to have to give us something, and that something is going to have to be your laws and your rights. You're going to have to operate under our rights, our human rights dictates, um, our constitution, our amendments, our laws, and I think that's just the only way that realistically that we can move forward with determining what land belongs to who and who gets to have a say in what happens in internal and external affairs.
That's very we actually do that a lot when it comes to African countries, where when they ask for assistance, we put a lot of um, conditions on those assistance programs, and a lot
But
of
the
those
difference
conditions.
there's a huge difference there. The difference is that those countries aren't as developed as other countries. And so they already need an infrastructure. So they lack the infrastructure already. So at that point, it's like we're providing all this stuff for you, and we're providing, everything else on top of it. You're going to have to let us dictate the infrastructure of this country, of this state, because otherwise we're not going to be able to help you anyway. Because we're going to have to invest all of our manpower. We can't just build up this entire system for you and then just give it over to you because we can't reliably expect you to maintain it. That's why they do that with African countries.
Uh, well, a lot of the stuff that goes with African countries is giving them autonomy in terms of the infrastructure, but the return is that they're supposed to change their laws when it comes to human rights, when it comes to trans rights and um, gay rights and
Yeah, and for African, and like
and
I've read, yeah, I've read articles on that too. And for the most part, I bet if you were to travel to one of those countries that has adopted those laws, and you were to mention any of those laws to them, they would probably just laugh at you. I doubt they take them seriously at all, and I think it's foolish to expect them to adopt anything simply because we gave them something. That's just not how they think. It's not how it works.
well, it doesn't work. That's what I'm saying. Is a
Yeah,
lot of the
yeah.
times they're just like, okay, we're not taking your money, and then the whole thing is that like China steps in and is like, we'll give you money.
Yeah,
um,
yeah. China has been absolutely just ball busting Africa for everything it has: minerals, resources, commerce, transportation, everything. And they've kind of just said like, we're going to take your stuff, but you're not going to be allowed into our country, type of deal. Which it makes sense. It's China. It's not
you're
really a
not allowed
surprising thing.
in our country.
Yeah, yeah. Literally, they literally have like Uyghurs, Muslims. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly.
No,
Like
it was yeah,
Uighur.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it, but they have them in like camps outside of China, where they essentially just use them for labor, or they just exile them entirely, which is kind of messed up. And I'm surprised there isn't more issues between the Middle East and China because of it. But I guess since it's like a separate group kind of thing, that they're not really seen as part of the main tribe, so to speak.
It's an organ trade. There's
It is, yeah,
yeah, it's an organ trade that goes on. They actually they kill them and then they
yeah,
harvest organs. And
and that's
something
yeah.
I don't think people talk about is that Germany is a very sus very sus
I would
country. They
I
actually
wouldn't be
buy
surprised.
a lot of the organs um go to Germany, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when was the last time you saw a German comedian? Yeah, they don't laugh very much. There's a reason why.
Yeah.
Because they're gobbling on organs.
Oh, is that why?
Yeah, but it's like I've seen a lot of videos too, and of like China, of like native China, where there's this one video I saw where this guy is like walking through. He explores abandoned areas in China, like as like part of his like TikTok thing. And there's one video he posted where he goes to this abandoned building and he finds decaying in like children's bodies
Ooh.
in like a pool, like a swampy, like disgusting looking pool inside of this just straight up concrete building with like no doors. It's like something you'd see in like a horror film. But it's all real. It's all real. And the rib cages of those bodies were torn open. So you already know what happened is their organs got organs got harvested, and their bodies got dumped there, and no one expected to have anyone find them there. And like a few days after that guy posted, he didn't post anything at all, and then he just deleted the video and then started posting videos like it had never happened. So the theory is that the Chinese government shut him down and said, "Hey, you got to delete the video, and you're not allowed to talk about this."
Wow.
And yeah,
Yeah.
so it's a pretty serious issue.
It's the organ trade. It goes completely. I mean, it goes under the radar, but it happens a lot. I know a lot of them
Yep.
go to Germany. I'm sure they go to the Middle East. I'm sure they go to
Yep.
Russia. Like it's crazy the stuff that goes down over there. Um,
Oh yeah.
I do want to jump back to Israel and Benjamin because he's been a
Yep.
very unliked figure and not
Oh yeah.
exactly
No.
known for his
Polite
calm.
demeanor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
He has not.
So
He has not been a very good person, so to speak. At least in terms of conversation.
yeah, I'm curious what their reaction is going to be. Not just in um to Iran, but also now that they do know that they are gonna go quote unquote untouched. The Rafah invasion. You know about that?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I feel like well, for those who don't know, a lot of Palestinians are kind of grouped up in this. I mean, Gaza's already a fucking small area, but they've been pushed up. It's like 1.7 million Palestinians in an even smaller area. And
Mm-hmm.
Israel has been planning to invade this area to look for Hamas terrorists, and it's been a
Yep.
really big contention point. It's considered a red line a lot for Iran and its proxies, and probably some of the other Arab countries. Um, and it's kind of been on pause while they try and figure out a ceasefire for Hamas, and while they get a plan together to evacuate as many citizens as possible, which hasn't exactly gone well. But now that they know Israel, and Benjamin know that they can kind of go untouched, or maybe they just think that. I do feel like that invasion is probably on the table, and it'll probably happen pretty soon. Um,
I think that they're not going to do anything. I think the only reason why we're hearing about it is because they don't have any plans to do anything.
really?
That's the only reason. Yeah, I think like the thing is like when stuff gets leaked to the media, it has to go through like a bunch of different channels before it actually reaches the media. And the thing is like if like for any like tactics of war, you're never going to announce that you're doing something so that they can have time to build up their defenses. You're never going to announce an invasion. It's just going to simply happen, and then people will hear about it. But because we're hearing about, oh, it's been postponed, we're going to delay it, yada yada, that means it's not going to happen at all. They're just saying that because they want the people on the other side to know that, hey, we were thinking of an invasion, but we're not going to invade. We've decided on postponing it because we think that you guys haven't attacked us enough yet. But you're getting close, so don't push us, guys. Don't push us, or we'll get involved and we'll invade you. That's pretty much what it is. It's a threat to the other side using the media.
Uh, I don't know about that one, Chief. I think they're very serious. I think they don't care whether or not there's defenses. I mean, they announced the invasion of the north when they invaded the northern Gaza. They flat out dropped flyers overhead and said, "Hey, get the fuck out. We're coming in." I mean, that was a huge deal too. I think Israel's been very vocal about where they're going and what they plan on doing. I think
But
they just
Gaza is a safe attack. Like there's no like you don't really risk anything from attacking Gaza. That's why it's been such a heated political discussion. Is that you don't lose anything from attacking it. Like you don't risk anything. You don't. There's no chance that Israel suffers because you attacked Gaza in some way. Whereas with like the other countries in the Middle East, like Iran, like you have something to risk. You have something to lose if you potentially attack these people. And that's why Gaza has kind of just been like this like weak little thing, like weak little punching bag that they can just hit and not really suffer any repercussions from.
So you're saying because Rafah is a red line, they won't attack because then they would suffer consequences?
Correct.
So my argument
Correct.
is that because they just suffered quote unquote what would be consequences and nothing happened, they were able to successfully block it off. That's exactly why they would continue the invasion.
I think that if they were to proceed with that invasion, they would not be able to handle the repercussions that would come from the Middle East. I think once again, there's only two reasons that they're talking about postponing it. The main reason, which is what I believe the reason is that they don't want to actually invade. They just want to prevent the other side from attacking them in a peaceful manner for the most part. And then the second reason, which I think is more unlikely, is that the reason that they're stating that they're postponing it is because they want to keep the defenses low. They want to keep their guard down in the Middle East to give the United States time to come in and assist them with the invasion. That's
No,
that's, that's the only two reasons I could think of.
that's crazy talk.
Yeah,
No way. I mean,
yeah,
we'll see. I think it'll happen pretty quick. A lot of it hinges, or well, they say hinges on the ceasefire agreement, and I don't think I don't think Hamas is backing down. I don't think Israel's backing down, and I think another one of the reasons that one, I kind of want to jump back because it, I, Iran, Israel pretty much came out and said they were going to respond to the attack, and one of the things the U.S. said was that whatever they do, whatever happens next, we will not be a part of it. It's not on us. That tells me, as a viewer, oh jeez, dude, Israel is about to fucking do some fuck shit. Like, if the U.S. comes out and says whatever happens next, I'm not saying something's gonna happen. Whatever happens next, we had nothing to do with it. It wasn't us. That tells me, bro, Israel is about to do some very nasty things. Um,
No, I disagree. I think America is just lying because they don't want to cause any other political problems. So they don't want to create any other issues. The reason that they're saying that is because they're just literally just lying about it. They're just saying, "Oh, we're not involved with this, so don't think of us as part of their team." When in reality, those Israel jets and Israel
that's their
forces that are going to
device,
be going, they're going to be funded by America. They're going to be
so kidding.
American jets, and they're going to be
Of
American
course.
pilots in them. Yeah, and so it's like,
Wow, you think there's gonna be American pilots too? Wow,
yes, absolutely.
you're full in the
They will send.
tinfoil hat
Yeah,
theory.
100%. They will straight up. They will send in their best pilots if they need to. 100%. Because Israel will literally just be like, "Hey, we want to do this thing. Send us your best," and America will send in their best, and
Wow,
they will go. They will go inside of ships or planes that are flying the Israeli flag, and they will go in and they will strike. And then it won't be the quote unquote the Americans, it will be the quote unquote Israel. And so they will avoid any potential conflicts with China as a result because they're going to be like, it wasn't us, it was Israel. And so China isn't as afraid of Israel as they are of the United States. And so it's not going to create this sense of impending doom for surrounding countries where it's like, oh, the United States is doing all of these things. It's time for us to react. Instead, it's going to be, oh, it's Israel rightfully attacking the people that attacked them. There's no need for us to get involved. That I feel like that's what's actually happening.
wow. Well, stuff like this has happened before in the past. Um,
Yeah.
but I think I don't think so. I mean, we'll never know because we're just fucking sitting here and they're over
Yeah,
there
like
doing their thing. But
whenever I see something in the media that comes out, like anything in like the mainstream media that comes out, I always think of it, or like in certain situations for the most part, I think of it as the opposite of what is actually happening. Because the only reason that we're hearing this information is because they want someone else to also hear this information that isn't the main people, like the general populace. There's someone else that they want to know this information that isn't us, and that's why I'm like, okay, I'm going to think the opposite of what they're telling me here. So when America says we're not involved with Israel, if they do anything, that tells me, okay, they're fully involved with whatever Israel is about to do, straight up,
that's
because they
fair.
don't want to deal with the repercussion. 100%.
I do think there's some involvement to that degree. I don't know, but
Yeah.
what do you think about the line that everyone says? Every country, I think at this point has started saying, "Oh, we're going to do usually attack. We're going to attack at a time and place of our choosing." That's like the new line that all the leaders say. Iran
Yeah.
said it. It started with the U.S. The U.S. was the first one to say that shit after our base in the Middle East got attacked.
Yep.
And then Israel said it, and Iran said it. What do you think about that line? What does that mean?
Can you repeat the line again?
The
Sorry.
the line is, we will respond or attack at a time and place of our choosing. That's what everyone says.
I think all that means is just that we have the freedom to attack you, and essentially what they're saying is we have the resources. And so what they're essentially waiting for is a reply that says either we have the resources as well or we're crazier than you, something along those lines. And if they don't receive that kind of response, then it does give a sense of confidence in the country that is attacking, for sure. I think for the most part, especially if you're a defending country, you want to be underestimated. Like you want to be thought of as weak. Like if I'm a country, I always want to be thought of as weak as much as humanly possible. So if someone's like, "Hey, look at all this stuff that A or X country has," I'm always going to be like, "Oh no, we don't have anything. I'm nuclear weapons, not us. Ballistics, I'm afraid not. Fighter pilots, couldn't say for certain." And so whenever I hear something like that, like we will respond at a time and place of our choosing, that's people trying to essentially just flex and say we can do whatever we want. I think the reason why other countries have adopted it is because they're actually
Well,
weak,
well, the
and
U.S. the
because it,
U.S. said it,
yeah.
so now they got to do it because the U.S. said it. It's one of those
So
things where,
they're copying what the United States says
yeah,
because the United States is powerful, and so they believe that if they use the same statement, it'll subconsciously come off as that they have the same power as America. That's kind of my reasoning or my thought process behind it.
yeah, it does go back to a lot of countries are waiting for somebody else to do something first, which is why I think we're in this kind of loop of escalating behavior between countries.
Yeah.
We had the invasion, and then Russia invaded Crimea, took Crimea, then invaded Ukraine or the rest of Ukraine. Um, and then we saw Hamas attack, and we've seen Israel's response, and then we've seen Iran's response, and now we're waiting on Israel's response back, and it's just this loop that we are kind of in right now, where it's just escalatory.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it just you're right. Like it just goes back to like, oh, look what the U.S. did. Look what Israel's doing. We can do that. We've been waiting to do that for decades, and now we can do it.
Yeah.
Yay! And all we have to do is say
Exactly.
this line. So actually, it does also go back to one of the excuses Russia uses for invading Ukraine was um, NATO's intervention in a genocide that was taking place. I think it was in Kosovo, um,
Also,
or somewhere around there. Yeah, there was in Central Asia, where like Kyrgyzstan or where the fuck
yeah, yeah,
Turkmenistan, like where all those countries are. There was a genocide taking place there, and the U.S. had intervened under the reasoning of, oh, a genocide is taking place, which is covered under uh, the
yeah.
UN Charter. How convenient. And Russia, this is the back door of Russia. This is like part of their logic behind the invasion as, oh, well, there's kind of a genocide happening in Ukraine. They're attacking Russians. That's kind of like a genocide. We need to intervene.
Which is
So,
why it's a bad. Once again, a double-edged sword. You allow one person to say it, and other people can just say it for no reason. I was literally just talking about it earlier. It's like if you allow one person to say, "Hey, there's a genocide going on," when there's actually a genocide going on, other people will say, "There, even when there is no genocide going on, that there's genocide going on," so
mhm.
they can invade as a part of the policy. Which once it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous policy. Like you would know if there was a genocide going on. There would be videos online. You would see something happening at this
But you
point in
won't.
time in the year
But you won't.
in 2020.
It's too
You don't think
controlled.
so?
Well, no, because like I mean, let's take a look at the Palestine Israel thing, where everybody all of a sudden has this amazing opinion about genocide, where everyone knows, wow, Israel's committing genocide. That's crazy. Let's all get emotional and involved. And yet nobody talked about the genocides in Ethiopia. People, half the people in the world didn't really understand what was going on in Syria, and it's because of how controlled those mediums are. You have to go out of your way to see that stuff. Well, half the people are scrolling on fucking TikTok, and it's completely controlled by a foreign government. And of course, they're not going to show you what's happening in the backyard of their country or within their own borders or within their allies' borders. Why would they? They're not going to show that shit. But however, hey, Israel attacking Palestinians, best believe that's just gonna be plastered all over the internet. And it's not just not even just China, but like the Middle East. There's only so much that those citizens of the Middle East can say about their own government. They can't say much. However, plaster the U.S. or a U.S. allies, whatever their activity is, it's so bad all over the internet. Fucking show them, let them know how bad it is. Even though there's genocides and fucking insane amounts of assaults on the female gender in those countries all the time, and it goes under the radar. For example, Iran uh, has a very nasty habit of killing 16-year-old girls or under because they're not wearing proper clothing. That's not just it's not only in Iran, by the way.
No.
The Taliban also reinitiated stoning for women if they commit a certain crime or some shit. This is a really common thing that happens all throughout the Middle East. It happens all throughout Asia, where there are these really awful things that is definitely covered for intervention in the UN Charter, and it's not shown on the internet. You have to
No,
go out
it's
of your way to find it. But however, hey, you want to see, some terrible thing happening to the Palestinians? All over the place, and everyone, of course, is scrolling and seeing this shit, and they're just all out assaulting uh, what's going on there, and there's no care in the world for the people who are, dying silently because there's no freedom of coverage over there. There's no freedom of speech over there, so they can't say those things.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I will say I've seen from both angles. I've seen there's a girl, Israeli, that got killed by like Hamas. Who she was at a music festival. She got raped, her leg broken, and then she got shot in the head. And they put her on the back of a truck and just drove off with her. That video I've seen. I've seen videos where Israeli children have been killed by Muslims in the Middle East, where they've had their heads chopped off and used as like a soccer ball.
oh my god.
So I've seen some pretty horrific stuff on both sides of the aisle, which is why I'm kind of like, hey, we shouldn't even really be involved with this. This is kind of just between both sides, and ultimately, Israel is really weak. They are honestly really weak. If it wasn't for their Iron Dome, they would have been annihilated by now. If we're being honest, and 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 honestly, they they initiated, especially Benjamin initiated a lot of the territorial takeover of Israel back in the day, and so there's still a lot of newfound hatred and people that are still within power in the Middle East. So it's not something that's going to go away anytime soon. I think ultimately it's best to just leave it between both of them. Israel has received plenty of funding by this point. If they are unable to deal with the situation themselves, then they have failed as a country ultimately. And I think at that point it's simply Darwinism.
I mean, that's fair, I guess.
Yeah,
I still think it falls under, you give up even a little piece, and they see it as a victory. It rallies them to that cause. A lot of people on that side of the fence, they see Western culture as like, a literal evil infecting their lands, and I mean that quite literally. Quite literally, they see
I don't
Western.
blame them. I don't blame them. I honestly don't.
I mean, I don't know. For me, I just think about the women over there who, I think Afghanistan's a really good example of what good can come. Oh God, this is going to be touchy, but what good can come from intervention? It didn't stick, but over
Yeah,
20 years that we were there, um, minus obviously the impact of loss of American lives and Afghani lives, the women there had way more freedom. They could go and get jobs. They were reporters. They could start their own businesses. We put in tons of infrastructure, roads and schools, tons of schools where women can go to schools and they can learn and get educated. I mean, there was a reason that when we pulled out, people were clinging to the bottom of the planes that were taking off. That shit's not normal. You know what I mean? Like that shit
yeah.
is not normal. And yeah, since we've pulled out, it's been downhill for those women, and
Yeah.
it's just gonna be like that for them the whole time. At what chance do they have? There's
Well, I,
none.
I think back to why were we there in the first place? Why are we in Afghanistan to begin with? And the biggest reason or the biggest modifier that people think of really is 9/11, right? People think of 9/11, people getting emotional over the 3,000 lives lost and going to war. But the thing that people don't know is that it wasn't done just by Muslims that just happened to get into the country. They were given Israeli passports. The reason that they were given Israeli passports is because Israel needed our help. And the only way they were going to get our help is if they created a false flag situation. And so what they did was they brought over some Muslims with some radical beliefs, put them through training as pilots, and sent them off to hijack planes and eventually crash them into the towers. And that was all done by Mossad. A little known fact. Most people don't know that information. A majority of people, if you talk to them, will talk about how much they don't like the Middle East. But the reality of it is, it was indeed Mossad that did it, and or at the very least, they funded it and they facilitated their travel into the United States. And so it was mostly Israel's doing in terms of that. So the only reason why we're there to begin with was because of Israel, not even because of the Middle East.
Well, for those who don't know, Mossad is basically Israel's CIA.
Yeah.
uh, I mean, there's a lot of information. There's a lot of mystery around 9/11, and that can be a whole thing itself. But in
It could.
general, the Middle East is quite a mess. It's a mess of politics, and again, there's
I
just
mean, I
so
could be wrong. I could be wrong. Obviously, it could have just been a coincidence that they just happened to have certain kinds of passports and they happen to be there to get pilots training or whatever. But from my perspective, from what I've researched, is that Mossad helped in it, or at the very least, some sort of separate entity that was involved with Israel. It may not have been Mossad specifically, but somewhere along the line, they had to have gotten from the Middle East to America, and they didn't do it on their own dime because they were radicals, and radicals typically don't have a whole lot of income. They typically are not really endowed. You look at a lot of the endowed people in the Middle East, and they're not typically radicals. They're typically politicians or people in power, and they typically live very peaceful lives. So, and while I can understand that at first glance, it would make sense to invade the Middle East because it was indeed radicals that attacked the towers and attacked the Pentagon. Um, but if you want to talk about how they got here, that's another story entirely. And like I said, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they did, somehow fake Israeli passports, and that's how they got here to begin with. And it wasn't Mossad. And I could just be theory crafting here. Um, but from my understanding, like at least that's what I feel like. I feel like potentially they had assistance from someone in Israel, at least. That person could have been involved with, the Muslim ideology, but I think it's definitely a possibility that someone somewhere in Israel, any entity in particular, I don't know, uh, helped with that because they wanted that war to go on, which is obviously wrong. It's immoral. But strategically speaking, if that was the case, if Mossad was the facilitator of it, I think it's incredibly smart. I think it's actually so big brain of a move to get one of the biggest superpowers at the time to initiate a war with your enemy. I think that's insanely smart, and I have a lot of respect for them for that. If that's the case, I
it's
don't really care about the lives lost. The strategy is just too good. It really is just too good.
it's
And
been
every time yeah,
it's been proposed before more than once. I think it
yeah,
was I can't remember which president it was, but they came out and said that I think it was the CIA had I think it had to do with Cuba. Talk about setting up a false flag operation, very similar
yeah,
to 9/11. And then there's also people who believe the Zimmerman note back for World War II, the note that Germany sent to Mexico telling them to invade the U.S. or whatever, just to distract us from what was going on in Europe. That people also say that's false flag. It's just the only problem with stuff like this is that like how do we know which ones are real or not? And we'll never fucking know. You know what I mean? Like we'll have no, we can't know. We'll just never know.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it is shitty. It wouldn't surprise me, but
Yeah.
um,
No, I think like, and even when I like realize that information, it's like really, like I like America and everything, but that like that that game plan is just too smart to not be like, maybe I should go to Israel. They seem to have a much better idea of what they're doing over there.
they're really smart.
Yeah.
They've been known the Pegasus
Yeah.
technology, which is like part of their Big Brother surveillance program. It's like a spy software. It's actually I think pretty sure it got picked up by the U.S. too because of how good it was.
Yeah.
I mean, Israel has invented quite a bit of technologies, and a lot of their economic success comes from the things they've invented. It's the same with like South Korea and Japan. They've
Yeah. Yeah.
um, a lot of their thriving. A lot of the reason for their thriving in capitalism is because they have really smart people, and also Israel does a really good job at promoting um, their independent companies and people who are inventing things. They have a program there. They do a really good job at like sponsoring these bright minds in order to make money because they need to be able to defend themselves. So I mean,
Yeah.
in general, they're smart people. They do a lot to promote intelligence.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like they have one of the biggest intelligence agencies on the
Yeah,
planet.
yeah. Massad's no joke. Massad's no joke
They
for
deal with
sure.
psyops. They deal with all kinds of different operations involving social media, involving cyber warfare, uh, and it's a pretty intense operation overall. Because I mean, if you think about it, like Risk, that's their team. That's who they're trying to pull up from the bootstraps. That's who they're trying to have succeed, and they're willing to take any measures for the most part to ensure that that happens, even if it means draining the American bank accounts to zero and funding their entire operation over there using American taxpayer money, which is smart. Like I think if they're able to do that, they should absolutely fuck us over in every way possible.
There was a meme that came out from the attack on, was it Saturday or Sunday?
Yeah,
And it was the Iron Dome defending Israel against the incoming missiles and drones, and the
yeah.
captions were like, my taxpayer money, and then on the Iron Dome, and then for the missiles it was like somehow also my taxpayer money. I was just dying, dude. That shit's so funny
Yeah,
to me.
it's actually true. This is the funniest
Yeah,
part.
this shit cracked me up. I couldn't believe it. Did you
Yeah.
were you watching? So where were you as the attack was going on? Were you like kind of keeping an eye out? Were you paying attention to social media at all, or
Oh
were you just
yeah, I
kind
mean,
of like,
I was looking through the usual media channels, Twitter, Facebook, of course, Fox, CNN, just reading their articles just to see what they had to say about it. Pretty standard stuff, nothing crazy. The reality of it is, you mainly just want to read the mainstream media stuff for the most part, at least in terms of war, because they're not going to really give you an opinion on it because it's not like a politicized issue within America. So it's like, oh, here's some more stuff that's going on. We'll give you a generic article about it with no particular bias. Those are the articles you really want to read are the unbiased ones. And it's like, okay, this is what they're telling me, so I immediately think the opposite of what they're telling me. I assume the opposite every single time. Because if I'm hearing it, that tells me they want me to think the opposite of what's actually going on. So
I
I
mean,
just
it's not a
immediately swap.
this is your idea, like how you process the information is like really common, and I think it
Yeah,
sucks because you either have two choices. One, you can accept what they're telling you, in which case you're probably getting lied to and manipulated, which is fucking like TikTok and mainstream media, right? Or
yeah,
you have the opposite effect because you can't trust them at all. So you think the opposite of whatever the fuck you're saying, and so you end up with these two extremes where really you just have no idea what the fuck is happening. It's so frustrating because I'm just like, I just want to know what's taking place. Let me formulate my own opinion, please. You're supposed to be
exactly.
a news agency, like just show
Yeah,
me the images and information and I'll derive meaning from it. You don't need to tell me how I should feel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but you can't.
Let's get rid of the biasy. Like, just straight up. Let's just
Yeah,
get rid of it.
there's a larger push for it, which is nice. Again, shout out to Elon.
Yeah.
But I did think it was interesting. We could, for the first time, we kind of saw um, what a modern attack would look like live, and how it would be perceived by the people of the world, like
Yeah.
live, in real time. Like it was really like you could see the drones and the missiles coming in at real time. There were so many videos, like live feeds of the Iron Dome in action and the explosions in the air, and some of these bombs hitting the ground or the explosion at the airport. Like it was happening live. Like you could see that shit fucking live. And I think
Yeah.
that's like kind of our first taste at what a modern war might look like in terms of media. Like it was kind of crazy watching it go down. It was like, I mean, you're just
It's
watching
all
the warfare.
televised pretty much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
like the Vietnam War all over again.
there's cameras everywhere. But even with Vietnam War, they would take pictures, and it would take time for the pictures to come back. Now you can see a literal video and hear people screaming in the background and fucking, losing their minds. Like, this shit's so crazy. And you can see it live, unfiltered.
Yeah.
Well, as unfiltered as you can believe.
Yeah, I mean, like I've already seen plenty of war videos. I've seen all the Ukraine stuff. I've seen pretty much everything you can imagine. Every horrific war action that's been taken, I've probably seen it by this point. It's not like a flex or anything. That's just my morbid curiosity speaking. Um, but also, it's the fact that if the war does get televised, I think seeing that kind of stuff will be a lot more common, which is good. I honestly think it's good to see horrors of war. I think it lets people know, it teaches people about the value of life, about how sacred it's supposed to be, and how war just kind of dismantles the entire value of life. Um, and no innocent people should die. The only people that should die in war should be the soldiers. Those are the only people that should die in war. And anyone else that dies is tragedy. As if not saying that the soldiers dying isn't a tragedy, but that they have already signed up their lives for that
Mm.
cause.
I do think we, as our generation and the ones that came after us, have lost a perspective when it comes to war.
Yeah,
And we're kind of getting a crash course on it. And we always hear people calling for a ceasefire, or why can't we just pull out and not get involved, or why can't we why do why don't we just say please stop? You know what I mean? It's just like,
yeah,
guys, listen, there are some people who want to hurt you, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. They want what you have. They just want you to die. And
yeah,
that's sad, but it is also a truth that I think people kind of need to like understand. Like there are enemy actors out there in charge of entire countries of millions of people who are willing to dedicate an entire economy, millions of lives to making you die and take your shit. That is just the
yeah,
reality. And I think we've been very removed from war for so long, um, that now that we're seeing it live, I think it's a crash course of reality for a lot of people. And I've talked to some friends about this, and they kind of say the same thing, where it's becoming, there's a movement mentally from, wow, this is so bad, we should just stop, to, oh fuck, like, this isn't going away just because we close our eyes and say pretty please, like,
yeah,
this is a reality. It's scary as fuck, and I think that we're gonna have to get over it. But that reality is kind of setting in for people as they see this shit online and they realize what's going on. um I don't know,
yeah.
it
I don't know
sucks.
about you, but if war breaks out, I'm moving to Alaska.
Dude, I would not move to Alaska. It's the closest country. That's the closest state to Russia.
Yeah, exactly. What's the worst case scenario? The Russians bring over vodka and we have a drink.
A
Like what are they
drink
gonna do
off.
once they
That's
get
how
there?
the war
Like,
is settled. To drink off.
yeah, pretty much. It'd probably be a tie, to be honest. But actually, no, they probably win. But it's like, what are they gonna do once they get to Alaska? Like, hooray, we've conquered Alaska, and then Canada's just gonna be sitting there with like a bunch of United States forces, and it's gonna be like, okay, we'll stop here, and that'll be the end of it. It's like worst case scenario, I have to start earning rubles instead of
Rubles,
American
yeah.
dollars, and I have to wear one of those weird little hats and have a pet bear or something. I don't know, but I would, as long as I still had internet, as long as I still had like an internet connection, like a place to live, I think I'd still be fine. I'd be okay. I'd be like, oh, this is Russia now. Like, yes, this is Russia now. I'm like, okay. Has anything changed? No, not really. Here's your rubles. Like, cool. All right, see ya. I close the door, go back inside. I'll pretty much be the end of it.
Yeah. Oh, well, that sounds like a dream too.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the only other alternative for me would really be probably Iceland.
yeah, I know Iceland and Greenland is. I mean,
And the thing is, you don't have to worry about population control in like Iceland or Greenland because the suicide rate is so high because life is so peaceful there.
they're.
So,
Wait, the suicide rate is high because it's so peaceful there.
oh yeah. Like if you search it up at all, like if you look at like, I'm pretty sure it's the Iceland suicide rate. I could be wrong. Let me look it up real quick. But last I checked, their suicide rate. Oh yeah, it's suicide per 100,000 people. Japan is at 19.4, which is really, it's one of the highest suicide rates in the world. And then
Yeah,
you have like Iceland, which is at like 10. It's like 10 point something. Where is it? Yeah, 10.4. For whatever weird reason, it says here that South Korea is at 24.7. What is
my
happening in
God.
South Korea?
Yeah, oh, I've heard it's like it's the stressful environment, the work environment. So like in terms of
Yeah,
it goes like Europe, who's very much like we fucking need to work only 3 days a week or 4 days a week and have the rest off, and then they criticize America because we have such an aggressive work culture, a competitive one,
yeah,
which is it's kind of changing. That's like a thing that Democrats kind of push for. And then you have Asian countries which are just like, I'm gonna work until my fucking hands fall off, and then I'm gonna work some more.
exactly. My hands will
So
be on fire and then I'll become like a wood burning person or something. And then you have
yeah,
Mexico, which is sitting at 4.4. Mexicans really don't kill themselves, do they? They literally just drink and eat and then they're just happy. That's it. That's all they need. Whereas everyone else is like, "Oh, why do I exist?" They're just sitting there having a good time in Mexico. Maybe
sure,
that's why so many people
tequila.
flee there. 2.9 2.9 for Greece. Like, has Greece ever not been the GOAT? Has Greece ever not been the straight up GOAT? They started the Olympics. They had some of the best novels, the best epics. Like, how is Greece not still just the GOAT? Like,
They had a
maybe Greece would, yeah,
they
maybe
had an
Greece just wins the
economic
war.
it had an economic collapse at some point. But that being said, they actually had one of the only recoveries from going bankrupt. And they're actually seen as like a growing economy now, which is crazy. So Greece really is
Wow.
the goat.
They
Uh,
really, yeah, I mean, they had the best philosophy, best philosophers, It's just like, how do you not think that Greece is going to win the war, I'll root for Greece.
yeah.
If if we're being honest, though, Israel's probably going to end up winning the war more than likely, if it comes down to it.
We'll see what happens. I mean, maybe things calm down, maybe things heat up, but either way, it's very clear that there's a lot of hot zones around the globe right now. Pretty much just waiting on one in Asia, I think. Like we've got one in the Middle East now, and we've got one in Europe. Just waiting on the
Yeah,
one in Asia, and you know, I guess we'll just
yeah,
see what happens next as we wait for Iran's or Israel's response. So
yeah. We'll have to see what happens, but I definitely think that well, things aren't in a good position, but it's not. It hasn't reached the breaking point yet to where things are going to start getting set up. I think it's going to be a while, to be
uh,
honest. I don't think it's going to be this year.
that's what everyone says. Everyone's like, "Oh, this terrible thing just happened," but I don't think we're there quite yet. And I get it, I do, but also, man, like I think
Yeah,
it's always it's always just one fucking misfire of a gun, one misfire of a missile. It just has to land in the wrong spot at the right time. It's never something so major. It is always just these tiny little triggers that end up setting off, these major conflicts. It's always some small shit where everyone's just trying their best to, make sure we don't nuke each other, and then it's just one tiny little notch that kind of sets someone over the edge. And dude, I hope it's not the U.S. because if the U.S. throws its gloves off, I don't think people are
Yeah.
ready for the consequences of that. And it's kind of the same with Israel, where I don't think you want to really poke that bear. Benjamin
Yeah. No.
is not known for being very calm tempered, and
No, he's brutal. He will go all out immediately. He
yeah,
does not care. He
no,
he
for
does
sure.
not care.
It's in his best interest to go all
It
out.
is.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, like the dude is incredibly smart. I gotta give him props. Like he's managed to manipulate his way to the fucking top and stay there for how many years? I don't even know at this point. Decades. And it's crazy. He's managed to facilitate the continued survival of Israel despite dealing with this like huge entity to the east of them that just wants to straight up destroy them, which is insane. And you have to give him props for that, regardless of how ruthless you believe he may be.
yeah, he's been in and out of power, I guess, multiple times. I actually didn't know that, but
Yeah, he has been, but he's had his hand in the cookie jar the entire time, pretty much.
hmm.
And that's what I'm referring to. And it's like,
15 years total,
yeah,
longest serving prime minister in the history of Israel.
yeah,
Wow.
ain't for no reason either. Ain't for no reason.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, uh, we're just living in quite an interesting time where I think.
Yeah, it's Benjamin's world, and we're just living in it.
True,
Yeah.
true. Um,
Mm. But I do think that's I think there will be a morning where we wake up and we see what's happening on the news, and I'll probably notice, and I'll be like, okay, this is what's happening now. So I feel like everyone will know.
I well,
I feel like, yeah,
I don't. I keep thinking the same thing too. But after the attack, Iran's attack on Israel, I think it's become like hard to say because I was scrolling through social media while it was going on, and everyone was just losing their mind. World War Three, it's happening. It starts today. It's happening.
yeah,
Which I mean, it's kind of
exactly.
fair. Like Israel's getting attacked. They easily in the middle of that attack could have been like, okay, we're firing back. The end of story. We're just firing back. Maybe they knew that they were going to stop most of those um, uh,
Missiles.
missiles, yeah, and
Yeah,
drones. Maybe they knew, but it if they don't, they easily had justification for attacking back, and if it was the U.S., we would have. If we had that much shit coming at us at one time, maybe we wouldn't because we know we could stop it. But if we had thought that that shit was going to land, best believe 100% within fucking 15 minutes of that taking off, we would have responded. So, I mean, I
yeah,
think they easily had enough justification. It's even what most of the Western governments are saying too, is that they do have the justification to attack back. They didn't,
yeah.
as
They
far as we
didn't.
know, but they could have, and it could have kept escalating really quick. It really could have.
Yeah,
We're seeing like
yeah. The good,
slow,
yeah.
yeah,
The good news is for America, we have two oceans that kind of separate us from both of these entities. So it's kind of like we live in this like peaceful area for the most part, simply because we have this ocean that separates us. But at the same time, it's like if we want to acquire things too, we also have to go through the same embargoes and the same sanctions as the surrounding countries, which sucks, but it is what it is. And I think that ultimately, when it gets right down to it, um, America will probably stay true to what they said for the most part and not appear directly involved in whatever Israel decides to do, simply to not start any further issues politically, as to not spark any like talks of war at least. And I think the Middle East is probably going to just going to have to accept it as fact, even if it's not, because the alternative is to pick a fight with the United States as well, which they don't want.
yeah. I think the U.S. has drawn very obvious red lines, uh,
Yeah,
in terms of when to get involved and when not to. What do you think of whenever they ask Biden or VP or Secretary of State, whenever they ask them what what are the what they think about Iran or even Russia to attack or whatever they're about to do, they ask them like, what do you have to say about this? And they say don't. You ever
Yeah.
hear that shit? Don't. What do you think about that? I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know if it's more terrifying that that is the only word, or if it's not scary at all. I know a lot of people. Obviously, it's the president. They're gonna hate on him. They're like, that's not enough. You gotta say something more. But like, what do you think?
I think uh, I think all of those people, like most of the people in government, are actually just figureheads. They don't really make any actual decisions for the most part. Um, there's kind of like a little shadow government that operates because you have to think about it like this. America is a huge country with a bunch of money on the line, a bunch of power involved, a bunch of politics involved. You can't let some fool at the top ruin it for everyone else. So what do? You set up an inner circle, an inner system that is designed to moderate and maintain the fools, the figureheads, so that they don't fuck it up for all the other people in power that are living, their comfy, cozy little lives at the top. And so that inner circle is always going to operate in their best interests, even if it means drugging the wazoo out of Biden with whatever he needs to operate during the day. It doesn't matter. They'll make him say whatever he needs to say, even if they got to torture it out of him. These people are figureheads. They do not make decisions. They say what the decisions have been made by the inner circle. They are the spokesperson for the inner circle. They are the megaphone for them, so to speak.
I
They do
see.
not actually do anything. So these people, I don't even really think of them as anything other than a puppet.
Hmm. Well, that's a common belief too.
Yeah.
Um, I think we've talked about the event enough. Unless there's anything else you would like to bring up here, you think is important to mention.
Make sure you buy Elon Musk's new Iron Dome system for $299.99. Install it at the top of your house right next to your Skylink satellite dish, and ensure that your home too is safe from any potential radical attacks. And yeah, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stop my wife from beating me. And I think that's about it.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for coming on and summarizing all of these things, just all of them. Thank you for summarizing all of them
Yeah, no problem.
and informing the
Anytime.
people.
We need to inform the people. It is
Yeah,
necessary. Beep boop.
yes.